Here's how this challenge works. Whatever I pull from this pack of Pokemon cards becomes my team in-game in Pokémon Scarlet. I can then only use those Pokemon until the next major fight of the game. If we win, we then open up a new pack of cards, giving us a whole new team to use in the next section of the game, and so on. However, if we lose a total of 3 times, this challenge is over, and I have to destroy every single card we've opened in this entire run, making this a high-stakes game of Pokemon where I could lose out on hundreds or even thousands of dollars. This is the Keegan J Pokemon Card Gauntlet Challenge. Let's begin. We load into the game, and after being kicked out of our home, thanks to our crippling card addiction, we're given our choice of starters. However, we won't be getting any of these Pokemon, as instead, we'll be receiving our first team from this booster pack of Stellar Crown. The most expensive cards in this set are the illustration rares of Terrapagos, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. Those are the cards I'll be looking out for the most. So, opening up our first pack of the challenge, our options for team number 1 are Pawmi, Fan Rotom, Lileep, Bombodil, Marowak, Frogadier, Koraidon, Rhydon, Grimmsnarl, and Noctowl. That all combines for a total pack value of about $1.15, so we're not quite rich yet. Taking all of those cards, first, we remove any Pokemon who aren't actually in Scarlet or Violet. Those are considered null and void. Then, we can build our team using what's left. Now, obviously, the very beginning of the game was never going to be too much of a challenge, although there is something hilarious about pulling up to the very first rival fight against Nemona's level 5 Duck before whipping out an ancient sun demigod in the form of Koraidon. Anyway, after one of the most brutally mismatched fights of all time, we can quickly move forward through the opening routes of the game before charging up this hill until we reach the main city of Misagoza. And it's here that we're given our 3 main goals of the challenge: to defeat all 8 gym leaders, overthrow all 5 team star bosses, and to slay all 5 of the powerful Titan Pokemon. After each of these bosses, we'll be opening up a brand new pack of cards and receiving an entirely new team. So, opening up a bad pack could be disastrous. But with the introductions now all out of the way, we can begin heading towards our first boss fight of the challenge against Katie, the bug-type gym leader in Cortondo. Now, when fighting a gym leader, I can only bring an equal number of Pokemon to make it a fair fight. On top of that, for all boss fights, terastallizing is banned, my Pokemon will be the same level as our opponent's ace, and I'm also playing on set mode, while also not being allowed to use any healing items in battle, making this whole challenge way more difficult. Now, obviously, since we got lucky enough to pull the literal box legendary out of pack number 1, this first gym fight is an absolute piece of cake. Koraidon doesn't have many moves at this level, but its stats are just so insane that spamming almost any attack with this thing is enough to sweep through Katie's bugs, giving us a very quick and very decisive win. That's badge number 1 secured. Sadly though, that means we do have to say goodbye to our Koraidon, as our next team will be coming from pack number 2. This time we have Grubbin. What a terrible, terrible start. Greavard, Joltik, Toedscool, Electivire, Dubwool, who isn't in the game, Pangoro, who also isn't in the game, Tornadus, Veluza, and finally, Klinklang. Yet another Pokemon who isn't in the game. Despite that pack being pretty worthless, while also having a bunch of dead pulls, thankfully, we're still in the early game and don't need too much firepower to take on the next boss, the Crab King Titan, Klawf. Klawf being a rock type makes him very susceptible to Toedscool. And I mean, just look at the strut this guy's hitting on this card. There's so much aura here. After hitting the Titan with a Stun Spore, we begin firing off Absorbs with our landlocked Jellyfish. And while Klawf does manage to overpower our Toedscool with Vice Grip, at this range, we can bring in our water type Veluza, who cleans up the first phase with an Aqua Jet. Klawf retreats to power up for its second phase, and we begin chasing it down. As an added rule in this challenge, I'm not allowed to heal up my Pokemon between phases of these Titan fights, making them significantly harder than usual. However, in the case of Klawf, this crab is still about to get cooked. because after teaming up with Arvin for the second phase, our Veluza continues running wild as a string of water pulses and aqua jets clean up our second main boss fight. With Clorf taken care of, Arvin is able to collect the first Herba Mystica, and we release our fish back into the ocean, as it's time for us to open up another pack and get ourselves a new team. Realistically, as these early boss fights are the easiest fights of the game, it's a bit more of a warm-up. At this point, I'm more interested in trying to pull some valuable cards, rather than worrying too much about what team we get. Although, that mentality was absolutely going to shift, as the difficulty of this challenge would gradually become even more absurd. For now though, it's on to pack 3. This time, we pull Clang, Cyclozar, Gulpin, Greavard, Togedemaru, Veluza again, Tornadus again, Glameow, Pawmi, and Ledian. We still haven't gotten any amazingly valuable pulls, but the total value of the cards we've got at risk here is starting to rise, and it'll only get higher the further we make it into the game. Also, I've got to mention just how much I love the art on this Togedemaru card. He looks so happy. Anyway, after removing the Pokemon that aren't available in-game, these are the Pokemon that we've got access to take on Brassius and his grass types. Although, in the end, we only needed one of them, because it turns out our Gulpin is a beast. By spamming super effective sludges, we dish out big damage to Brassius. On top of that, Gulpin's Liquid Ooze ability also prevents Brassius from recovering back HP with moves like Mega Drain. So, Petalil quickly went down, and the Smoliv that came in next followed soon after. This leaves Brassius with only his ace, the terastallized Sudowoodo, who is a powerful Pokemon. However, after Gulpin uses Yawn, Sudowoodo falls asleep at the wheel, clearing us to land the third and final sludge that we need to finish the fight, securing our second badge. And yeah, Brassius had just been soloed by one single Gulpin worth 7 cents. After the fight though, we're approached by this strange old man. Pardon me, would you be the Gambler Jay I've been hearing so much about? Yes, I am. I'm guessing you've heard about my unrivaled Pokemon skills? Oh, no. I heard there was a loser out there who had been spending hundreds of dollars on Pokemon cards. I just had to see it for myself. I have to go. I have some very important things to take care of. You're about to open more cards, aren't you? No? Maybe. Moving on to our 4th pack, and this one decides who we get to take on the second Titan, Bombardier. This is definitely one of the hurdles of the Pokémon Scarlet early game, so I was desperate for a good pack. This time, we've got Electabuzz, which is an amazing first pull for this fight. Lechonk, Reboot, Rotom-Mow, Toedscruel, a Gravity Gemstone, Veluza again, Slowpoke, Scorbunny, and Zeraora. This would be an insanely lucky pull for this fight if Zeraora was in the game. But since it's not, sadly we won't be able to use it. Despite that, while it may not be the most valuable pack, this is still an insanely strong pack. Not only did we pull 2 of the cutest cards I have ever laid eyes on, but with Electabuzz and Rotom-Mow, we've got access to some great electric types. This challenge is all about trying to get the best team members possible, which is actually pretty similar to one of the functions of our sponsor, Odoo. See, Odoo provides a whole suite of apps designed to help you run your own business. And one of the most important aspects of running a business is making the right choices about who to hire. That's where Odoo's recruitment app comes in. With this app, you can easily post new job listings and keep track of all the positions you're currently advertising. Once you receive an application, you can view the resume and other details through the Odoo dashboard. If the candidate is a good fit, you can drag them into the next stage of the hiring pipeline. On top of that, you can send candidates questionnaires, as well as efficiently schedule interview calls directly into your calendar with just a few clicks. Once you've decided who to hire, Odoo can also help speed up the onboarding process by pre-filling the applicant's details into a contract, as well as your employee database. So don't get stuck recruiting a team of losers. Instead, check out Odoo using my link in the description. Your first app with Odoo is free forever, so try it out and take your business management to the next level with Odoo. So, after assembling my new squad, we charged up the mountain, dodging the falling boulders, before finally being confronted by the flying titan, Bombardier. In this fight, I decide to lead with our Toadscruel, who, thankfully, is just able to survive a super effective pluck on only 9 HP. We're then able to land a very important stun spore, paralyzing the titan and slowing it down somewhat before Toadscruel falls on the next turn. But this clears us to bring in Electabuzz, who now outspeeds the Titan as Shockwave hits for enormous damage. And thanks to some luck with paralysis, Electabuzz remains unscathed as one more Shockwave ends the first phase, sending Bombardier to power up before the second phase with Arvin begins. But this ends up being very smooth, as our electrified lawnmower can throw down a few super effective Thundershocks, and before long, Bombardier had been fried to a crisp. That's our second Titan taken care of, and I am so grateful that we managed to pull these electric types there. After the fight, Arvin finally reveals why he's collecting the Herba Mystica, to heal his sick dog, Mabistiff. Oh come on Arvin, that dog is all old and creased. Its condition barely warrants a PSA 3 rating. Why don't you just sell it and buy a better, higher graded dog? If you don't get out of this cave within the next 3 seconds, I'll make sure that you're buried here. After leaving Arvin behind, now we're bound for our next big fight, which means we get to open another new pack. This time, we're taking on Giacomo, the first boss of Team Star. And to be honest, these Team Star bosses are the part of this challenge that scare me the most. Their Starmobiles are so deadly and have so much sweeping potential, meaning that if we don't pull a solid team for these Team Star fights, we could very easily be wiped out of the challenge. With that said, now it was time for us to open up our next pack. So this time, we have Glammeow, Pancham, Charjabug, Salandit, Rapidash, Vikavolt, Diancie, Ledian, Salazzle, and Galvantula EX. This card looks so sick, and while I haven't pulled enough valuable cards to retire yet, now our total has risen to nearly $5. Not only that, but Giacomo is one unlucky man, because not only did we pull 2 great bug types, including our first EX card, but we also got Diancie, one of the best fairy types ever invented. All of this means that Giacomo's dark types are in grave danger, because first, I backtrack to Cortondo, as it's here, behind the gym, that we can find the TM for Draining Kiss. And after equipping this to our Diancie, we were about to make very light work of Giacomo. Against his lead Pawniard, we opened with our fire type Salazzle, and even though it's raining, nerfing the power of our fire moves, we're still able to outpace Pawniard as a string of embers take it down. This leaves Giacomo with only his Starmobile, and once our Diancie hits the field, this fight is as good as done, because one super effective Draining Kiss deals enormous damage, while also recovering back more health than Giacomo can remove. Within just a few turns, the last of the Starmobile's health was kissed away, and we had earned a very decisive win. After the fight, we're shown a soppy backstory about Team Star and the power of friendship. But I mean, who needs friends? Instead, you could have crippling credit card debt and boxes of Pokemon packs to open. That's just as good, right? Debt and loneliness aside, our challenge has been going smooth so far. But next up is our toughest fight yet, as we'll be taking on Iono, who's packing 4 electric types, including a terrifying Terramiss Magius, who literally has no weaknesses. This fight can be deadly, so it's vital that this next pack gives me something I can work with. So, to take on Iono, we've got Chinchou, Yamask, Bombardier, Rhyhorn, Crispin, Talonflame, the Area 0 Underdepths, a Grand Tree, an Illustration Rare Zeraora, and Alcremie. From a value perspective, that's our strongest pack yet. Not only did we pull this awesome Grand Tree, but we also got our first Illustration Rare in Zeraora. This is the most valuable card we've gotten yet at over $12, and it looks so good. However, from a battling perspective, this pack is terrible. We've got several cards that aren't even Pokemon, and out of the Pokemon we did pull, 2 of them aren't even in the game, and 2 others are flying types types, which have an awful matchup against this gym. While we did manage to at least pull Rhyhorn, it's nowhere near strong enough to carry us through this gym on its own. So I was feeling very endangered for this next section of the game. Regardless, after a short trip across Paldea, eventually we rode on into Levincia, where the next gym is located. But before we can fight the leader, first, we're approached by Nemona. Well, if it isn't Gambler J. Are you still an unemployed loser? No, Nemona. I'll have you know that I am now an investor. Wait, really? What do you invest in? I've invested every dollar I have into Pokemon cards. Got it. So you are still unemployed then. While we are forced into a battle with Nemona here, thankfully this fight is relatively straightforward. Our Chinchou can bury Rockruff with a few Bubble Beams before Talonflame cleans up her Paw Me soon after. Nemona's Ace Quaxwell is a little scary, but Talonflame is still able to get it low before Chinchou finishes the fight with Bubble Beam, giving us a stress-free win. Although our next fight was going to be anything but that. And since we can only bring 4 Pokemon to take on Iono's 4, I decided on this squad as my best option. I definitely wasn't feeling confident about our chances, so I went hunting for some TMs to give us a little extra firepower, and after putting together our best strategy that I could think of, we marched forward into the Iono zone, ready to take on our toughest fight yet. Iono leads with her Wattrel, who is pretty much walled by Rhyhorn. This lets us start the fight strong, as Rhyhorn can set up a substitute to mitigate damage. This lets us comfortably begin setting up Swords Dance, which sharply raises our Rhyhorn's attack. And since Wattrel is so helpless here, we're able to max out our attack pretty quickly. After this, I wait for Wattrel to eventually break our substitute so that I can then set up a fresh one before on the following turn, we finally start attacking, as a single smackdown is all we need to crush the goofy little bird. Next up is Iono's Belly Bolt, and this is the reason why I needed substitute. This electrified frog knows Water Gun, which will absolutely KO our Rhyhorn in a single hit, but thankfully, our substitute can soak up the Water Gun, clearing us to land the super effective Bulldoze that we so desperately need to take care of Belly Bolt. Things had been going well, but this is where our fortune starts to turn, because next, Iono's Luxio hits the field and instantly gets to flinch onto Rhyhorn with Bite. This practically ruins my entire strategy of setting up another substitute so that I can deal with the Mismagius in the back. So, with that plan now out the window, I instead switch to Alcremie and begin using Charm to nerf Luxio's attack. But Iono's luck then continues, as the very first Spark she lands also leaves Alcremie paralyzed. I hate this dog and its stupid RNG cheese. After being fully paralyzed, because of course that happens, I continue charming Luxio as we just managed to get it to -6 attack. After a Draining Kiss from Alcremie does some solid damage, I switch back into Rhyhorn as I desperately want to get up a substitute before Mismagius hits the field. However, a Bite from Luxio puts us only 2 HP below the 25% we need to set up a substitute. As such, the move fails, and now we're absolutely cooked. Out of options, I just have Rhyhorn finish off Luxio with Bulldoze. But then, the Grim Reaper emerges, Mismagius. Immediately, it terastallizes into an electric type and quickly executes Rhyhorn with Hex. I then try to send in Alcremie next, but since we're paralyzed, Hex does massive damage, giving Iono 2 kills in 2 turns. With only 2 Pokemon left, I send in Chinchou next and just hope for the best. Instead of attacking, Iono hits us with Confuse Ray, which is funny because I actually had the exact same idea. We also landed Confuse Ray, turning this fight into a showdown of who has the best RNG cheese on their side. Well, on the next turn, not only does Iono land her Hex, but she also gets a critical hit. Are you kidding me? It was about this point that I was ready for us to lose our first life in this challenge. However, turns out we weren't done yet, because not only does Chinchou land its Bubble Beam onto Mismagius, but we also get a lucky speed drop too. This means that we now outspeed as Chinchou clutches up on the next turn, landing another Bubble Beam before Mismagius finally hits itself in confusion. Another attack brings Mismagius into the red before Chinchou is finally buried by Hex. However, we still have Talonflame in the back, and with one final Flare Blitz, Miss Magius was slain, and we had somehow managed to clutch up in that fight. Chinchou, we are truly not worthy of the greatness that you have shown us today. So, despite pulling a pretty awful pack, we had beaten Neona and secured our 3rd badge. Although, if that's just the 3rd gym, imagine how we're going to stand any chance against a high-ranking Team Star boss or an Elite 4 member with packs like that. This may just end up being one of the hardest challenges I've ever tried. Thankfully though, we do get a little bit of a breather, as our next 2 fights are much more manageable. First up is Mela of Team Star. For this pack, I pulled Rhydon, who would have made my life much easier if it was in the last pack, Morgrim, Gossifleur, Cubone, Crispin, Dubwool, Eldegoss, Fletchinder, Finneon, and Alcremie. Again, by no means is this the best pack, but pulling Finneon and Rhydon makes this fight relatively straightforward. Although, as it turns out, all we ended up needing here was Finneon. I got a little lucky here as it was already raining when the battle started, and this allowed Finneon to just spam Water Pulse, which quickly took care of Torkoal. Surprisingly, the Starmobile also couldn't keep up with our boosted damage from Water Pulse, giving us possibly our easiest fight so far. So, after our tiny pet fish had soloed a boss all on its own, the next opponent in our crosshairs is the Steel-type Titan, Orthworm. This time around, our pack included Eevee, Riolu, Duraludon, Joltik, Revavroom, Briar, Azumarill, Eldegoss, Lacey, and Cradily. This Lacey card is alright, but I'd love to get the full art version with her doing the iconic pose. Anyway, while this wasn't a great pack, now we have over $20 worth of cards on the line. So our total was growing, and thankfully, this fight against Orthworm wasn't going to give us any trouble. For the first phase, we lead off with our adorable little Eevee. And after a yawn puts Orthworm to sleep, our Riolu can come in and take advantage of Orthworm's low special defense as an onslaught of vacuum waves quickly rip through the first health bar. Then, in the second phase, after Joltik paralyzes the Titan with Thunder Wave, the combination of Arvin's Hex and our Electro Balls are all we need to claim a very quick kill on the Metallic Worm. With those few quick wins, we had once again started to build up some good momentum. However, the game was only going to get harder from here. Our next main fight brings us to Cascarapha, where we have to take on the 4th gym leader, Kofu, and his water types. So, let's open up this next pack and see what we have to work with. We got Yamask, Pansear, Carnivine. Great, all 3 of our first pulls aren't even in the game. Pawmi, Slowking, an Ockerberry, Crabominable, a second, more sinister Carnivine, Lantern, and finally, Rhyperior. Possibly the worst card we could have pulled for the water gym. So that pack was pretty atrocious. Although we're not completely lost, since at the very least we managed to pull a Lantern. Anyway, after completing a brief side quest to return Kofu's wallet and buy him some very suspicious looking seaweed, we're finally able to take on the big man in battle. Since this fight's a 3-on-3, out of our available cards, I decided to bring Slowking, Pawmi, and Lantern. Kofu and his one singular brow leads off with Veluza. Our Slowking is pretty bulky though, so Slash doesn't deal too much damage. And in response, we hit Veluza with Yawn, ensuring it'll fall asleep on the next turn. My plan from here was then to boost up Slowking with Nasty Plot, but things did not go to plan. Because while I am able to set up a second Nasty Plot before taking Veluza down with Power Gem, then Wugtrio hits the field, and these wiggly worms are a nightmare, because instantly we're hit by Headbutt, which also ends up causing me to flinch, because of course it does. This means that on the next turn, we lose our Slowking to Headbutt. Now it's down to a 2v2, and our hopes now rest on Pawmi to contribute. So I tried landing a Nuzzle to help deal with Wugtrio, however, it causes me to flinch again. Are you kidding me? I hate these worms. On the next turn, Pawmi is basically guaranteed to die, but this is where the luck turns back our way, because while Wugtrio's Headbutt does get the KO, Pawmi's static ability activates, leaving Wugtrio paralyzed, and this is massive, as it means that once Lantern hits the field in a 1v2, we now outspeed Wug Trio, allowing us to quickly land a discharge, wiping out those worms for good. With Lantern still at full health, our win here is basically sealed, as we're guaranteed to survive one of Crabominable's hits, and 2 discharges are all we need to KO Kofu's Crab, giving us a much more complicated win than I was expecting. While we may have gotten our 4th badge with all 3 lives still intact, these fights were quickly becoming more treacherous, and the reality began to sink in that we're probably just a few bad packs away from losing this challenge, as well as having to destroy the awesome cards we've pulled so far. Regardless, we have no real choice but to press on, and next up is a very deadly fight, as we'll be taking on Atticus of Team Star. Not only does he have a powerful Starmobile, but he also has 3 fully evolved strong poison types at his disposal, so we need some strong pulls here. To mix things up, I decided to start opening packs from Temporal Forces. The most valuable cards in this set are the illustration rare copies of the Paradox legendary Pokemon, but there are so many cool looking cards in this set, like this gorgeous Swordsbuck card, or this cute Grotto card with a Marill riding on its back. Anyway, to take on Atticus and his poison types, we will have Drillbur, Rellor, Ponyta, Chatot, a rescue board, Sandy Shocks, finally something useful, a hand trimmer, Ekans, a full metal lab, and Scovillain EX. This card looks awesome, although as a whole, that pack is pretty disappointing. We didn't get any really valuable pulls, and the only 2 decent Pokemon we pulled were Sandy Shocks and Scovillain. Besides that, we're left with a snake and a guy who rolls around in his own poo. I fear we may be in trouble here. So, with our team consisting of the only 5 valid cards we pulled, I began storming through the next team's starbase before stepping up to face Atticus and his poison types. He leads with a Skuntank, and this is the key to my plan. Skuntank's moveset means that Atticus will usually try to either use Toxic or Sucker Punch, but by leading with our poison type Ekans, we're immune to Toxic, and by not using any damaging moves, we can avoid Sucker Punch too. So this gives us free reign to nerf Skuntank, with Glare to paralyze it, as well as Scary Face to lower its speed. Then, we can bring in the rolling Poop Lord, Rellor, who spams Sand Attack, nerfing Skuntank's accuracy into the dirt. Since Rellor has now done its job, I use Memento, which sacrifices our Poop Bug to also lower Skuntank's offense. Basically, now we had turned Skuntank into a harmless little skunk. At least, that's what I thought. I sent in Drillbur next, with the intention of boosting up our stats with Swords Dance and Rapid Spin before sweeping. But that's not what happened, because I totally forgot that Toxic can't miss when used by a poison type. So, our Drillbur is instantly poisoned and put on a timer. My plan had completely fallen apart. I'm still able to boost up my attack and speed, but by the time I'm able to take Skuntank down, Drillbur ultimately succumbs to the poison immediately after, meaning that all the work I'd just done was basically for nothing. Now we're back to square one in a straight out 3v3 against Atticus. Next, I summon Sandy Shocks as Atticus brings in his Muck. It's not a huge threat to my Sandy Shocks, so we're clear to spam Charge Beam. And while the damage isn't all that impressive initially, it also boosts our special attack, helping us to take down Muck within just a few turns. Then, once Revavroom pulls up, we can hit it with a quite effective Bulldoze that just isn't enough to kill with one hit. As such, Atticus fires back with a Bulldoze of his own for big damage, before we quickly finish Revavroom on the following turn. This summons Revavroom's dad, the Poison-type Starmobile, to the field, and this is by far the biggest threat on Atticus's team. Since Sandy Shocks had its speed lowered by Bulldoze, I immediately switch it out, bringing in our Ekans. Not only does our Intimidate lower the Starmobile's attack, but Ekans can tank poison hits pretty well, while also using Screech to harshly lower the Starmobile's defense. And as it turns out, this Ekans is an absolute chat, because it's able to debuff the Starmobile's defense all the way to -6 before our snake is finally slain. Thanks to this massive contribution by Ekans, Sandy Shocks is clear to hit the field once more, as 2 bulldozers are all we need to take down Atticus's final Pokemon. Despite my plan completely falling to pieces, we somehow managed to pull through with the win. I've got to admit, one of my favorite parts of this challenge has been getting to use these random teams. Like, where else would you get to use such a random team like this? Now Atticus was behind us, and we had well and truly moved into the mid-game of Pokémon Scarlet. From this point onwards, every single battle has the potential to be deadly if we don't pull a good pack. Our next 2 boss fights are against the 5th and 6th gym leaders. So I began the long trek to Medali, where we would face Larry. Although, before that, once we arrive in the city, we're approached by Nemona. Well, look who it is. Still collecting those lame cards? Pokemon cards aren't lame. Look at how cute this one is. No one collects Pokemon cards anymore. Now we're all playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead. After leaving Nemona and her blasphemy behind, we're able to take on the normal types of the next gym. So let's see what we get inside of pack number 11. Heatmore, Yamper, Torracat, Grubbin, the return of Sandy Shocks, a Hand Trimmer, Rabsca, Metagross, which is an amazing card to pull, Beheem, and Melmetal, who sadly isn't in the game. By no means is that a valuable pack, but pulling a Metagross to take on the normal type gym is basically a cheat code, and combining it with Rabsca, who knows Revival Blessing, also gives us the option to revive Metagross if it faints. These lucky pulls make the fight against Larry very straightforward. A Zen Headbutt followed by a quick priority Bullet Punch are all we need to deal with Kamala. And while Larry's Dunsparce can be a threat with its ground type move Drill Run, Metagross can use Magnet Rise to avoid this completely. That's pretty much the only real threat to Metagross taken care of. And from here, our Steel Pseudo quickly finishes off Larry's final 2 Pokemon. So Metagross had soloed the entire gym to give us badge number 5. Although, after the fight, we're approached by Nemona again, and this time, she isn't alone. Alright, Gambler J, I've brought the Paldean top champion to settle this debate once and for all. Fine by me. Tell us, champ, do you prefer Pokemon cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards? Look, I don't really care about either of them. The only cards I collect are the credit cards of unsuspecting men. Damn it, where is it? I know my credit card should be here somewhere. After the debate, Nemona then forces us into a fight. At first, this was very smooth, as Metagross just continued being a menace, quickly wiping through the first 3 of Nemona's Pokemon. However, then she whips out Quaquaval, and this thing is a nightmare. Not only does it terrestrialize to boost up its water moves, but it also raises its speed with Aqua Step, giving it some insane sweeping potential. As a result, our weakened Metagross quickly fell. I then tried sending in Sandy Shocks, who fires off a big super effective Charge Beam and just falls short of getting the kill. With Quaquaval left on 1 HP, an Aqua Step then brutally crushes Sandy Shocks into the dirt. Obviously, our Torracat is going to die in 1 hit, meaning that it all comes down to Rabsca. If we survive this hit, we win the fight. But if Rabsca falls, we'll lose our first life. So Quaquaval begins charging up another powerful Aqua Step and we just survive! Rabsca barely hangs on, clutching up to land 1 last extra sensory, giving us a close win and keeping our perfect record intact. Nemona and Geeta decide to retreat for now, leaving us to open up a new pack. Although, I don't want to lose my Metagross! Please, don't leave me, Metagross! I'll do anything! But moving on to our next pack, this time we'll have Girafarig, Roselia, Cutiefly, Drillbur, Shiftry, Bianca's Devotion, Reuniclus, Elgyem, Carvana, and Dunsparce. This card looks great, but it's also a great Pokemon for this gym, as this time, we're taking on Rhyme and her ghost types. The trek to Montenevera is pretty long, but eventually, we reach the town. And after deciding on the 4 Pokemon I wanted to bring, as well as teaching some new TMs, we stepped up to take on the gym. Hello, Gambler J. How's the treasure hunt going? Have you figured out what you're hunting for yet? I'm hunting for a base set Charizard. I'd even kill my own homeroom teacher just to get one. I see. I'm just gonna back away slowly now. With that out of the way, we stepped up to the stage to face Rhyme. But once we do, we see this fully grown adult woman just tearing into a child, stomping all over his dreams. So basically, she's like one of those Pokemon card scalpers. Stay back! These products will lose their investment yield if even one of you little gremlins leaves a fingerprint on them. Since this fight against Rhyme is a double battle, and we didn't get any crazy strong Pokemon, I expected this battle to be really tough. But in reality, we've actually got a pretty solid strategy here. By having Shiftry use Tailwind, not only do both of our Pokemon get a speed boost, but Shiftry also gets an attack boost thanks to its Wind Rider ability. This means that we can deal out some big damage, as Shiftry quickly wipes out Banette with Foul Play before Dunsparce breaks Mimikyu's disguise. And since the crowd gives out stat boosts for KOs, this gives us some crazy momentum as we begin dishing out massive damage to Rhyme's side of the field. As a result, by turn 3, we had quickly dealt with the first 3 of Rhyme's Pokemon, leaving her with only her ace, Toxtricity. But thanks to all the stat boosts given to us by the crowd, Toxtricity instantly goes down to a super effective Sucker Punch from Shiftry, yielding us a pretty comfortable win in the end. Having secured badge number 6 with all 3 lives intact, I was feeling confident, and the good times would continue for at least a little longer as I set my sights on our next pack. This time, we pulled a Mr. Mime, Raichu, Victini, who sadly isn't in the game, Bronzor, a Booster Energy, Iron Shreds, a Buddy Buddy Poffin, Slugma, an Illustrator rare copy of Lickitung, which is amazing, and Iron Leaves EX. This pack is insane, by far one of our best yet, taking our total value over the $40 mark. Not only is this Lickitung card our best pull yet, I also love this art. I mean, just look at this derpy little guy enjoying his treat. I will protect this card like my life depends on it. While our adorable Lickitung sadly isn't in the game, we've still pulled some heavy hitters there with Iron Shreds and Iron Leaves. On top of that, since our next fight is against the Titan Great Tusk, we actually have a pretty straightforward fight here. Iron Leaves probably could have just soloed this fight, but in the end, I didn't even need to use it, as very quickly, the rest of our team pounded the penultimate Titan into submission for another dominant win. With that, next, we have the final 2 gym leaders to contend with. Generally, these 2 aren't considered to be overly difficult, so I'm sure they'll both be easy and we won't lose here whatsoever. Right? Well, first up, we'll be taking on Tulip and her psychic types. So, opening up pack number 14, this time we've got Frostmoth, Noctowl, Croconaw, Licky, Boratrus, a Full Metal Lab, Golurk, Shaymin, Metacham, and Torterra EX. This card looks awesome, like it's bathing in the sunlight. That pack was really solid. Not only did that Torterra give us a nice value boost, but we've also pulled some amazing Pokemon, especially for taking on the Psychic Gym. Before that though, once again, we have to deal with our rival Nemona. She may have nearly swept through me last time with her Quaquaval, but this time, we've got a much better matchup and a more well-rounded team. On top of that, our new Torterra is a beast here. Not only does it handle Nemona's Pawmot with ease, but it's also a good counter to Quaquaval. Our total tanks a hit pretty comfortably before hitting an almighty bonk, as Woodhammer secures us a much simpler win than our last fight with Nemona. With Nemona and her pathetic Yu-Gi-Oh collection left in the dust, now we can take on the Psychic type gym. At least, after whatever this weird minigame is meant to be. Truthfully though, we actually pulled some great counters to the Psychic type, so I was feeling confident going into this fight. Our lead Boratrus is so tanky here that it can set up a trillion entry hazards, turning Tulip's side into a minefield. After also landing a few bug bites for good measure, Boratrus finally goes down. This clears us to bring in Frostmoth. My plan here was to set up Tailwind before ripping through Tulip's team with Bug Buzz. However, that's not what happened. While this strategy is effective in finishing off the weakened Farigiraf, I didn't expect the Gardevoir that came in next to actually survive one of our hits. As a result, Frostmoth is decimated by Psychic, making this fight much more complicated than I anticipated. Thankfully though, our Golurk is a beast. With a single Shadow Punch, Gardevoir is slapped into its grave. And while the Espathra that follows does deal some big damage with Shadow Ball, another punch to the jaw from Golurk claims us another KO. However, we aren't out of the woods yet, because next, Tulip's ace finally emerges. Florges. And after terastallizing, Florges Moonblast instantly buries Golurk, bringing this fight down to a 1v1. Our Torterra going up against Tulip's Florges. Unfortunately, Tulip outspeeds us as Moonblast deals just under half of Torterra's health. We then fire back with a super effective Crunch, but barely fall short. Even after the poison damage, Florges somehow holds on within an inch of its life. This means that it all comes down to this next turn. As Florges charges up another Moonblast, we just need to dodge a critical hit on this next turn, and we do! Torterra just tanks the hit, and with only 14 HP remaining, we dish out one last Crunch, securing a very close win over Tulip. After the fight, we get to meet another one of the Elite Four members. Hi, my name's Poppy. I'm 8 years old. Hi, Poppy. Do you like Pokemon cards too? Of course not. I'm too old to be playing with Pokemon cards. You've made a powerful enemy today, child. Putting our newfound rivalry with a child aside, while we may have gotten our 7th badge, even with decent card pulls, we're still starting to struggle in some of these fights. And I started to wonder just how bad things might get if we don't pull a strong pack. Well, I wasn't going to be left wondering that for long, as we were about to have that question answered. For our next fight, we'll be taking on the final gym leader, Grusha, and his ice types. So I began opening up our next pack, which contained Carvanha, Ekans, Hertwig, Poochyena, Sandy Shocks, Reuniclus, a Misty Energy, Drillbur, Rabska, and Salvatore. I fear we are cooked. While that pack is worth a few dollars, from a battling perspective, it is absolutely garbage. Out of the valid cards we pulled, none of them are good into ice types. Most of them aren't even evolved, and the most powerful card we did get is weak against ice. This is, by far, the weakest pack we've pulled so far in this challenge. However, I was determined to keep our perfect win record intact. So, after choosing my best squad to take on Grusha, we headed to the top of the Glaciato Mountain, ready for a fight. And after a brief detour of sliding down the mountain, we stepped forward to face Grusha, ready to make a miracle happen. Against his lead Frostmoth, I go with Sandy Shocks. By instantly firing off a Power Gem, we hit Frostmoth for quad effective damage, taking it down in one shot. So, we had the early lead and things were looking good. Except, this is where things go wrong. Because next in is Beartick. And since this guy knows both Icicle Crash and Earthquake, our Sandy Shocks has an awful matchup here. So I try switching into Ekans, purely just to nerf Beartick's attack with Intimidate. After tanking an Icicle Crash like a king, Ekans is also able to land Glare, paralyzing Beartick, before an Earthquake crushes our snake into the dirt. I then send in Poochyena to land a devastating Fire Fang, but the damage is pretty abysmal. And to make matters worse, we then get hit by a critical hit Icicle Crash, ending our Pooch in a single hit. So, with Beartick paralyzed and slightly weakened, I send in Sandy Shocks and desperately hope that a Power Gem can finish Beartick off, but we just fall short. And of course, Beartick lands its attack as Icicle Crash does big damage to Sandy Shocks. While we are able to finish off Beartick on the next turn, and deal big damage to the Satitan that follows with another Power Gem, sadly, at this health range, Sandy Shocks can't take another hit, falling to a super effective Ice Spinner. This leaves all of our hopes on the shoulders of Reuniclus, but sadly, our Psychic type just doesn't have enough juice in the tank. We did manage to trade blows with Satitan and finish it off, but Grusha's Ace Altaria was just way too strong, finishing us off with an onslaught of Hurricanes. Yep, for the first time in this challenge, we had lost, meaning that we were now just 2 losses away from losing the challenge and having to destroy every cool and valuable card we've gotten so far. However, we can't dwell on that loss for too long, as now we've got to open up a new pack and just hope that this time we can build a new team capable of taking on Grusha. So let's try this again. This time, we've got Mudbray, Ghastly, Finizen, Dunsparce, Zeraora, who isn't in the game, Sharpedo, who also isn't in the game, meaning that this pack was looking atrocious. That is, until we pulled our next card, Metagross, one of the strongest pulls we could have gotten. To round out the pack, we also pulled Colossal, Skitty, and Bramblegast. That pack was barely worth anything, but I'm just glad that we got our Metagross back when we needed it most. So, ready for our rematch, I once again stepped up to face Grusher. But thanks to our new cards, or more specifically, this one, this fight is a completely different story. Because with an onslaught of Iron Heads and Bullet Punches, our Metagross lays down enormous damage, quickly sweeping through Grusher's entire roster single-handedly. With that impressive bounce back, we'd gotten our 8th and final gym badge. Immediately after the win though, we're approached by Geeta and Nemona. See? I told you he was still collecting Pokemon cards. Wow, what a loser! Oh my god, now he's crying. I've never seen something as pathetic as this. One day my cards will be worth billions. Then you'll see. We'll deal with the haters later. For now, our main focus is on battling the final Titan, as well as the final 2 team star bosses. And the first of those fights is against Ortega and his fairy types. Now, we've seen just how brutal this challenge can be if you pull a bad pack. So I was feeling pretty nervous as we opened up this next one. Inside, we ended up pulling Relor, Ponyta, Chatot, Cottony, an Explorer's Guidance, Latias, a Booster Energy, Minccino, Frostmoth, and Koraidon. From a value perspective, that pack was pretty lackluster. However, it's great for battling. We've finally been reunited with our Koraidon, and he even brought a Latias with him. I also need to point out how adorable this Minccino card is. I will protect you with my life, little mouse. All that aside, Ortega is probably the only fight of the game where pulling Koraidon isn't just an auto win. As a dragon fighting type, we're quad weak to Ortega's fairies, making this fight much more complicated than you would expect with 2 legendaries on our team. But thankfully, we have some great support Pokemon on this roster. So you're the notorious Pokemon card collector, Gambler J? Talk about underwhelming. I was expecting someone tall and buff. More like I was expecting a 6-year-old. Grow up, loser. It's just cardboard. Don't listen to him, Lickitung. Our bond is sacred. Now this fight had become personal, and I was determined to make Ortega pay. By leading with Cottony, our prankster ability lets us fire off priority charms, harshly nerfing Azumarill's offense. Then, after switching into Minccino, another charm brings it to -6, before Sing also puts it to sleep. With Azumarill now taking a nap, this is our best window to bring in Koraidon. I am able to set up 2 Swords Dancers, but once Azumarill wakes up, its play roughs still do sizable damage, while also lowering my attack. So, as a result, our Koraidon is left at +2 attack by the time Azumarill finally falls. However, this is still more than enough to deal with Ortega's next 2 Pokemon, as a few super effective Iron Heads quickly claim the lives of Wigglytuff, as well as the Dash Bun that follows. This then leaves Ortega with only his Starmobile, while Koraidon is able to land 1 more Iron Head for solid damage. Sadly, our Beast of a Dragon then falls at the hands of a magical Torque. Despite that, our support Pokemon continue doing the most. Cottony and Minccino are both still able to dish out some charms to help neuter the powerful Car. And while both end up falling in the process, their contributions mean that Frostmoth is able to hit the field and clean up the fight with a few Ice Beams. With that, Ortega had been crushed, and we were clear to move on to our next fight. This time, we're taking on the final Titan, Dondozo, and the Pokemon that we'll have to back us up include Wiglet, Arbok, Seedot, Totodile, Sawsbuck, Cypher Maniac's Codebreaking, Beheem, Sableye, Roserade, and Iron Valiant. Again, not the most valuable pack by any means, but these pulls are great for taking on the Titan Dondozo. In fact, we only really needed Sawsbuck for this fight. Our super effective Horn Leeches deal out massive damage, while also recovering back more damage than Dondozo can deal. As a result, the first phase is just us dog walking this whale, and the second phase that follows is basically the exact same story. Our matchup into the third phase Tatsugiri is a little less optimal since it's a dragon type. However, the combination of setting up Leech Seed and continuing our Horn Leech spam is still enough to wipe out Tatsugiri, giving us a very clean win over the final Titan. Thank you, Sawsbuck. We are truly not worthy. With all of the Titans defeated and the final Herba Mystica now obtained, Arvin can finally heal his Mabastiff back to full health. Aw, that's so touching, Arvin. Thanks, Gambler J. I couldn't have done it without you. No sweat. So, now that Mabastiff's healed, it's probably at least a PSA 7 grade now. Can we sell it yet? No! You're disgusting! Some things are worth more than money. Now you're just making up gibberish, Arvin. The only gods I have are money and mint condition colored cardboard. We'll deal with Arvin and his poorly misguided values later. For now, we have something far more sinister to tackle, because our next fight is against the final team star boss, Eri. To me, this is one of the top 3 hardest fights in the entire game. Not only does Eri have an insanely strong Starmobile with a completely unfair ability, she's also got 4 incredibly strong fighting types. Her team of 5 is just so well-rounded and so deadly. So, as we opened up this next pack, with only 2 lives remaining, I knew that we needed something good here. And what we got was Carvanha, Ekans, Turtwig, Poochyena, Iron Treads, a Buddy Buddy Poffin, Lycanroc, Grubbin, Mawile, and Iron Boulder EX. Not only does this card look cool, but its partial psychic typing makes this a very clutch Pokemon to unpack. Now we had eclipsed the $50 mark, and while most of that pack was pretty garbage, we at least have a chance in this fight thanks to the 2 future Paradox Pokemon that we pulled. However, this still isn't going to be easy, and I had to make sure that we were prepared. But after assembling the best roster I could, we descended down towards the final team starbase. One thing I have to point out though is that in this opening battle with one of the grunts, this family of Ursaring and Teddiursa didn't despawn, so it looks like this fight is a hilarious 8-on-1 beatdown. Yeah, let's see Team Star break through me and my gang. After that was taken care of, we began storming the team starbase, and before long, we were confronted by our strongest opponent yet, the fighting type demigod, Eri. Against Eri's Toxicroak lead, I opened with Lycanroc. Obviously, our rock-type dog can't put up much resistance against Eri's fighting types, but it can survive long enough to land 2 charms onto Toxicroak, harshly nerfing its attack. Then, I take this opportunity to switch into Ekans, who can now tank Toxicroak's hits pretty well. This allows Ekans to not only paralyze Toxicroak with a glare, but we can also set up through layers of toxic spikes just for some insurance. But I still wasn't done with Eri yet, as next, I switch into Grubbin, and this little bug has just one job, to throw down a sticky web on Eri's side of the field. After bringing Ekans back onto the field for one last Intimidate attack nerf, all of our initial planning had been taken care of, and now it's time to kick it into high gear. This begins by switching out Ekans to make room for our ace, Iron Boulder. Since Iron Boulder is a part Psychic type, I know that Eri wants to try and hit me with a Sucker Punch. However, we avoid this completely by using a non-damaging move, Substitute. Then, on the following turn, I use Electric Terrain because this means that for the next few turns, our Quark Drive ability will be activated, giving Iron Boulder a very important attack boost. With that, we can finally start our assault as Psycho Cut immediately wipes Toxicroak off the map. I then try hitting the incoming Passimian with a Psycho Cut too, but it just survives. I don't know how Passimian lived that, but this means that we lose the protection of our substitute before Passimian falls to poison damage at the end of the turn. Thankfully, the Lucario that follows isn't as bulky, allowing us to take it down with a single Sacred Sword. This all means that Eri was left with only 2 Pokemon, but these are her 2 strongest. And now, we've lost our substitute and the Electric Terrain is about to expire. So, I make the call that we need to regroup. To do this, first, I try to spam Intimidate nerfs onto Annihilate, getting its attack to -2, but losing both our Ekans and Poochyena in the process. I then have Lycanroc use Charm before it too goes down. Very quickly, Annihilate had ripped through half of our team. Since Annihilate is about to die to toxic damage, I have no choice but to just go straight into Iron Boulder and re-establish the Electric Terrain. We do still take some chip damage from close combat, but it's heavily reduced thanks to the help given by our fallen team members. So, Annihilate falls at the end of the turn, leaving Eri with only her ace, the Starmobile. And this thing is a menace, mostly due to its ability, Stamina, which means that each time it gets hit, it also gets a defense boost. And since both of our best Pokemon are physical attackers, this is a huge problem for us. Regardless, my only real option here is just to hit as hard as I can. So we hit a boosted Psycho Cut that deals big damage. Of course, the Starmobile then gets a defense buff, so each consecutive hit will deal less and less. Importantly though, Iron Boulder just survives a super effective spin out on only 15 HP. This lets us land one more Psycho Cut before Iron Boulder finally goes down. Iron Shreds then hits the field, charging up a big earthquake, and it barely does anything. Thankfully though, we're tanky enough to eat the incoming combat torque before landing another earthquake that leaves the Starmobile hanging on within an inch of its life. Fortunately, Eri decides to try and set up a shift gear, meaning that on the next turn, our futuristic Donphan is clear to land one last earthquake, finally taking down the dreaded Starmobile. With that, Eri had been crushed, and we had just scraped by to claim a big win. Although, it took a crazy lucky pack with some strong synergy to get there. Somehow, we'd beaten all 18 of the main game bosses while only losing one life in the process. But now, we're moving on to the end game. From this point on, every single fight is against teams with 5 or more powerful, fully evolved Pokemon. This challenge now turns treacherous, as there are no guaranteed wins from here on in. And with only 2 lives remaining, we're just a few bad packs away from losing and having to destroy everything we've opened so far. With that said, now it was time to open up our first pack and see our first team for this endgame gauntlet. This time, we've got Meditite, Turtonator, Hoot Hoot, Breloom, Mudsdale, an Explorer's Guidance, Colossal, Drampa, the Perilous Jungle, and finally, Iron Thorns. The future Paradox Pokemon just keep on coming. Not being able to use Turtonator or Drampa in this game is a huge letdown, but the rest of our pools are still pretty solid, and it's these Pokemon that we'd be relying on to help us take on Clive. His team is stacked with some really threatening Pokemon. However, his leader Rangaroo is very vulnerable, so my plan revolves around taking advantage of that. The first step is to set up Stealth Rock, which will do big damage to some of Clive's threats in the back. After that, as well as some necessary pivoting to avoid Yawn, we also burn a Rangaroo with Will-O-Wisp to nerf the power of Foul Play. After that, we then switch into our unexpected hero, Meditite. This little guy is the key to our plan, as we can spam Bulk Up, boosting both our attack and defense. And since we're boosting both, Foul Play doesn't deal massive damage. With Recover helping to keep us healthy, we can get both of these stats to +5. Then, Meditite can hit a quick Baton Pass, switching out and passing on these massive stat buffs to our incoming Iron Thorns. Now we basically have a supercharged Mech Tyranitar on our side of the field, and after a single Dragon Dance to also boost our speed, Iron Thorns crushes a Rangaroo with Crunch. Gyarados then comes in next, but after Stealth Rock damage, a single Crunch also takes it out too. This was certainly looking like we were about to sweep through Clive, but it didn't quite go to plan. While Fire Punch does absolutely end a Abomasnow's career, turning it into a puddle, then a Moongus hits the field. And of course, my luck is atrocious. Obviously, Fire Punch does finish it off in one hit, but a Moongus's ability activates, putting my Mech Godzilla to sleep. Wake up, damn it! We've got a city to burn! Sadly, Iron Thorns did not answer the wake-up call, as Clive's Poltegeist quickly gets the revenge kill, once again ruining my plan. Thankfully though, we've got some good reinforcements in the back. By using Spore and Leech Seed, Breloom can cheese a lot of damage onto Poltegeist before Colossal smashes that teapot with a Heat Crash. This leaves Clive down to only his Skeledirge, who is incredibly dangerous with its Torch Song sweeping potential. But despite Colossal getting packed up in a single hit, luckily, we still have our Mudsdale. Not only does our big horse tank a torch song, but in response, it only takes one last earthquake to bury Skeledirge, giving us the win in the end, even if it was a bit more complicated than I expected. You know, back in my day, we used to play a card game called Magic the Gathering. Alright, old man, go back to the old folks home and tell your made up stories to someone who cares. With Clive all taken care of, next up, we're taking on Penny and her assortment of evolutions. To mix things up, I went back to opening Stellar Crown packs to give us some more variety, and this one is pretty interesting. This time, we pull Nimble, Slowpoke, Grookey, who just looks so cute in this art. Just look at that cute little face. Ladybug, Lantern, Briar, Azumarill, Meditite, Baroom, and Blastoise EX. Not only does this card look awesome, but that also takes us over the $55 mark for our total value at risk. This pack is kind of fun because it mostly gives us a mono water team to take on Penny. And while this pack may look a little underwhelming, it actually gives us access to a pretty busted strategy. So after a little preparation, me and my big man Blastoise stepped forward to confront Penny. Alright Penny, it's time that you finally admit it. Admit what? Admit that you're a scalper. How else could you possibly have gotten enough boxes of prismatic evolutions to pull all of those evolutions? You'll have to beat me to find out. And beat her we shall, because thanks to some nice pulls, this fight is not overly complicated. Our Lantern knows the move Eerie Impulse, which harshly lowers special attack. By hitting Umbreon with a few of these, the Moondog is completely neutered. This allows us to bring in Big Man Blastoise, who can use a very useful move, Shell Smash. At the cost of lowering our defenses, this move will raise both our offense and our speed. With a few of these, we turn our Blastoise into a machine. This allows our murderous turtle to quickly rip through Umbreon, Jolteon, Leafeon, Flareon, and Vaporeon. While Blastoise does eventually fall to Sylveon, the rest of our Pokemon team up to gradually wear it down, with Azumarill's Perish Song eventually sealing our win, crushing Penny. Alright Penny, the jig is up. Now tell me how you got so many of those rare cards. Fine, I admit it. I know someone at Target who tells me whenever they have new stock. Is that really such a crime? Actually, it is. Officer, lock this heinous criminal up for good. With Penny now locked up, serving a life sentence, I was free to take her ill-gotten goods and add them to my flourishing investment portfolio. Moving on, next, we have to tackle Arvin and his full-powered team. This is another stacked roster full of powerhouses, and I'll need some good hits in this pack. So let's see what we've got to work with. Carnivine, Riolu, Lechonk, Varoom, Crabominable, Revavroom, Lapras, Hoot Hoot, Raboot, and Hydrapple EX. This is another awesome looking card, and it's not a terrible pack all things considered. With access to 4 fully evolved Pokemon, I was actually liking our chances. So after all the preparations were finalized, we charged up towards the lighthouse, ready to confront Arvin. Alright Arvin, I apologize for undervaluing your Mastiff. I can see that he means a lot to you. Thanks Gambler J, I'm glad you finally understand. And as a gesture of goodwill, I'm offering to buy it for $2.35, which is far above the market value. Do you want cash or a check? I want to beat you! Having denied our very generous offer, Arvin forces us into a fight. Our team has some heavy hitters, but we can't just set up on Arvin's lead, since Body Slam could leave us paralyzed. So, as Arvin leads with Greedent, I eventually send in our Crabominable after accidentally leading with the wrong Pokemon. This means that we do have to tank a Psychic Fangs, but that's not a problem whatsoever, as Drain Punch not only KOs Greedent, but it also recovers our health back to full. However, next up, Arvin sends in Scovillain, and this guy is a threat. With Grass and Fire coverage, it's got a great matchup against most of our team. So, I decided that my best option was to try and stall out its Fire Blast PP by pivoting my team around. This allows Hydrapple to recover HP with its Regenerator ability, while also making use of our Raboot, who has a natural resistance to Fire Blast. Once Scovillain is out of Fire Blast PP, its remaining moves are far less is threatening to our two steel types. So my plan from here is to now work on nerfing Scovillain's offense by using moves like Parting Shot on Varoom, as well as Charm on Lapras, before also throwing down some Toxic Spikes for added protection. During this process, we lose Varoom, and Lapras gets pretty low. However, this is where we go on the offense, as now I can safely bring in Revavroom and begin using Shift Gear, which boosts both our speed and attack. Thanks to all of our planning, Scovillain can barely leave a scratch on our car, allowing us to continue accruing boosts, bringing us to a maxed out attack and speed. From here, this fight becomes an absolute beatdown, as Revavroom runs wild, iron heading, and poison jabbing every single one of Arvin's team straight into the dirt. Even his beloved Mabastiff is pulverized, probably worsening its condition yet again. It was a clean win, with Arvin then running off into the distance, possibly because he knows he just lost out on making a whopping $2.35. With that, thanks to some really strong pulls, we had conquered the first 3 fights of the endgame, meaning that now we were bound for the Pokemon League. Before the battles though, first, we have to answer a very difficult quiz. Alright Gambler J, let's say you have only $10 to your name. Do you A, buy Pokemon cards, or B, feed your children dinner? Can I ask what set these Pokemon cards are from? No, you failed. After retaking the quiz, eventually we pass, allowing us to enter the Pokemon League. This will require us to take on all of the Elite Four members, followed by the champion, Geeta. Now, don't get me wrong, these Elite Four fights are not easy, but none of them ended up being too crazy either. None of the packs for these fights were all that valuable, but they did contain some pretty strong Pokemon. Against Rika's ground types, I pulled some great counters, like Toedscool, Lumineon, and Slowking. These gave us enough firepower to claw through Rika's team before a Perish Song from Marill onto Clodsire guarantees our win. While Poppy's steel types pose a massive threat, I got insanely lucky here as I pulled an even bigger threat in Koraidon. With possibly the best steel type counter we could have gotten, after our support Pokemon set up some hazards, Koraidon just goes on a tear, wiping through Poppy's team with Drain Punch and Collision Course. Stupid kid, that'll teach you to pretend that you're too old for Pokemon cards. In the case of Larry and his flying types, we got some really nice pulls in Electivire, Excadrill, and Keldeo. I also need to point out just how adorable this Pikachu card is. Look into those eyes. How could you not love this little mouse? During this battle, Electivire goes absolutely huge, with Ice Punch crushing Tropius, Altaria, and Oricorio. Then, against Larry's Flamigo, all we need is a super effective Wild Charge to fry that bird into submission, giving us our second win over Larry. This leaves only Hassel, and his dragons could easily melt through most teams. However, my good fortune continued, as this time I pulled Roaring Moon, one of the best dragons in the game. By having our sturdy Pineco set up the sun, we can then bring in Roaring Moon and get an attack boost thanks to its Photosynthesis ability. A few Dragon Claws then quickly rip through Hassel's first 3 Pokemon. After then using our support Pokemon to reset up the sun, Roaring Moon can glide back on in before finishing the fight with one last Dragon Claw. Just like that, Hassel had been defeated along with the entire Elite Four without even breaking a sweat. Our pack luck had been really solid, and my confidence was flying high as we prepared to take on the champion. But then, this pack happened. Because this time, to use against the champion, I pulled Fanrotom, Lileep, Bombardier, Electabuzz, a Glass Trumpet, Talonflame, Kofu, Fletchling, a second Glass Trumpet, and Cradily, who isn't even in the game. This means that to take on the champion, we only have access to these Pokemon. 4 flying types, 2 of which are related, as well as 2 electric types. This is looking so rough. By far, the worst pack we've pulled in a while. Regardless, I still felt confident in our chances as we marched onwards towards the champion. Alright Geeta, prepare for trouble and, hey wait, has anyone seen my credit card? No. Geeta opens with her Espathra as I opt to send in Rotom, and our bad luck was about to get even worse, because after being hit by Lumina Crash on turn 1, we then miss our Thunder Wave. This means that we have to tank another Lumina Crash on the next turn, leaving Rotom with barely any health left before finally landing Paralysis. To try and keep Rotom alive, I then Volt Switch out, bringing in our Dark-type Bombardier, who should have a good matchup here, except Geeta uses Dazzling Gleam on the switch, meaning that we take big damage. This had been a horrendous start. Thankfully though, Bombardier does land a Sucker Punch on the following turn, finishing the deadly Espathra. Although from here, things do not get any easier, because next in is King Gambit. Since I can't afford to take any more damage with Bombardier, I decided that my best option was to sacrifice Fletchling here, as this gives us a safe switch into Talonflame. My plan was then to fire off a big, super effective Flare Blitz, but still falls short of the KO. Somehow, King Gambit holds on before replying with a quad-effective Stone Edge that buries my bird into the dirt. Our team was falling to pieces, while Geeta still had 5 Pokemon left. To save this, we were gonna need a miracle. But there was no miracle. While we were able to gradually make our way through Geeta's next few Pokemon, we just didn't have enough juice left in the tank, as one by one, our remaining Pokemon were decimated one after the other. For the first time since Grusha, we had lost, meaning that now this was sudden death. We now had 1 life left to try and navigate through 3 of the hardest fights in the entire game. With that, I opened up our 28th pack, desperate for something that could stand up to Geeta. This time, we have Rotom Fan returns again, Mienfoo, Rotom Mow, Scorbunny, Reshiram, which is an amazing pull, Lumineon, Marowak, a Sparkling Crystal, which looks so cool, Grookey, and Zeraora, who still isn't in the game. Regardless, that pack is obviously way stronger than our last one. With Reshiram on our squad, as well as some solid backup, I knew that this time, we had a much better chance. Hey, wait, where did my other credit card go? I have no idea what you're talking about. Since I'm stubborn, I go for the exact same opening with Rotom Fan, except this time, we actually land our Thunder Wave on turn 1. This time, however, I stay in with Rotom and fire off a Hex, which deals massive damage to the paralyzed Espathra, taking it down in a single hit. Once again, Geeta follows with her King Gambit. To keep Rotom healthy, I bring in Mienfoo, half expecting to sacrifice it. However, that wasn't the case at all, because not only does Mienfoo tank a Stone Edge, but it also manages to land a high jump kick, which crushes King Gambit with quad effective damage. This fight was going so much better than last time. Our momentum then continues. While we do lose Rotom Fan to Go-Goat, this is where our Reshiram makes its debut. Our powerhouse legendary then proceeded to melt through Geeta's Go-Goat, as well as her Avalugg immediately after that. And after Rotom Mow deals with Veluza, the fight had dissolved into a 5v1. Glamora put up a good fight, but thanks to our numbers advantage, we gradually wear it down before claiming the final KO, as well as our revenge over Geeta. Congratulations, Gambler J. Let me be the first to say, hey, where did my credit cards go? It really is a mystery, isn't it? After a short detour to commit some severe credit card fraud, our attention turns to the final fights of this challenge. With only 2 battles remaining, but on our very last life, this challenge was coming down to the wire. The first of these battles is a final showdown with Nemona. Boasting a stacked roster of 6, I'd say this is the second hardest fight of the entire game. So, if we were going to stand any chance against this team, we would need some strong pulls. What was inside was Lileep, Pawmi, Fletchling, what an awful start, Marill, Mienshao, Salazzle, Driftblim, Purugly, Reshiram who rejoins the squad, and Metacham EX. What a sick looking card. That takes our total pulls to over $65, and that pack is actually pretty solid. We've got some heavy hitters and a bit of type diversity. So after assembling my strongest squad and improving their movesets with a few TMs, we gradually made our way to the center of Misagoza, where Nemona is waiting. I don't believe it. How did a loser like you make it this far? Through the power of sheer will and lavish overspending on colored cardboard, Nemona. The duel begins with Nemona summoning her Lycanroc, to which we respond by opening with Mienshao. I have no interest in dealing with Lycanroc, so after a quick fake out, we only need one super effective Drain Punch to put that dog in the pound. This gives us an early lead, with Nemona sending in her Pawmot next. This is one of the bigger threats on her team, so I effectively sacrifice our Pawmi, with Nemona's Pawmot forced to cannibalize its own kind. However, this gives me a safe switch into Salazzle, who then changes the weather with Sunny Day. And since Salazzle can tank Pawmot's hits pretty well, a Flamethrower brings the Electric Mouse to the brink of death, before Burn Damage finishes the job at the end of the turn. Now we were back in front, and our momentum was set to continue, as, for some reason, Nemona sends Orthworm out next. Obviously, this Metal Worm is instantly melted down by Flamethrower. I also land a Flamethrower on the Dudunsparce that follows, before Salazzle finally goes down at the hands of a Drill Run. Regardless, this is where our beast of a Mienshao returns. A super effective Drain Punch is all we need to clean up Dudunsparce, and a few more of these gradually wear down the big gooey Goodra that follows. All of a sudden, Nemona was down to only her ace, Quaquaval. However, we've already seen just how dangerous this thing can be, and it's for that exact reason that I have a plan. Because I packed one specific Pokemon for the sole purpose of countering this duck. Marill. Marill's Water Fairy typing gives it a great matchup here, allowing it to tank an Aqua Step before also using Charm to lower Quaquaval's attack. After which, I also land a Perish Song, which effectively guarantees our win. While Marill does suffer a hero's death, this clears the way for Drifblim to float in, blow itself up for no apparent reason, before Quaquaval finally succumbs to the deadly Perish Song of Marill. With that, Nemona, along with her Yu-Gi-Oh collection, had been defeated and was sent to the Shadow Realm for all eternity. Or at least until the plot needs her to come back. To my surprise, we had actually made it to the very end of this challenge. We've opened 29 packs, and despite losing 2 lives along the way, we had used randomized teams to somehow beat every main battle of Pokémon Scarlet. Except one, Professor Sada. By far the hardest fight of the game, featuring a team stacked to the brim with some of the strongest Pokemon in the region. With only 1 life remaining, we have just 1 more pack to decide our fate. Win, and we conquer the challenge, claiming every card we've opened so far. But if we lose, not only is the challenge over, but we'll have to destroy every single card we've opened since the beginning. This is the final chapter, and so let's see what we get. For our final fight, we have Beldum, Roly-Coly, Heatmore, who isn't in the game, Yamper, who's also not in the game, a Perilous Jungle. This is basically the worst start possible. Give me something good. Unpheasant, not in the game, Eri, an Explorer's Guidance, Reuniclus, and finally, Fluttermane. That pack ended so strong, with 2 solid Pokemon, one of them being an illustration rare that now takes our total value at risk to over $75. But while these 2 cards were great pulls, the rest of that pack was absolute garbage. There's only 2 other usable Pokemon here, and neither of them are even evolved. This is one of our worst packs of the entire run, and we've pulled it at the worst possible time. But ultimately, these are the cards we've been dealt. We have only these 4 Pokemon to try and beat the hardest fight of the game. And so, with only 1 life remaining, I gradually began the long descent into Area 0. Eventually, we reach the pit, and it's here that we confront Sada. The battle begins, and we desperately need a miracle here. Against Slitherwing, I lead with Roly-Coly, as I'd love to set up Stealth Rock here, but our little Rolling Rock is just too outmatched, as a single low sweep takes it down. Already, we were on the back foot, down to only 3 Pokemon, so I just send in our strongest next, Fluttermane. we fire off a big, super effective Dazzling Gleam, but it's still not enough to get the kill. However, finally our luck starts to turn, as Flutter Mane dodges a Zen Headbutt. This means that we can land another Dazzling Gleam to secure our first KO. Sada then responds with her own Flutter Mane, which devastatingly just survives a Shadow Ball. This allows Sada to return serve with another Shadow Ball, bringing us to the brink of death too. This is a nightmare, as we need to keep Flutter Mane alive. Thankfully, another Shadow Ball finishes the imposter Flutter Mane, after which Sada follows up with Sandy Shocks. This is a pretty bad matchup for me, so I switch into Beldum, effectively sacrificing our little Steel type. This is necessary though, as it lets me safely bring in our Reuniclus. An Earth Power from Sandy Shocks does just under half, while our Energy Balls do well over half. This means that we can tank 2 hits before Energy Ball finishes off the Prehistoric Magnet. Now the fight was down to a 2v3 and we were slowly crawling back into this. Except our hopes of a miracle were about to be crushed, as next in is Sada's Brute Bonnet, and with its priority Sucker Punches, our 2 remaining weakened Pokemon are both cleaned up in just a single hit. With that, we had run out of juice and lost at the very last hurdle. As much as it pains me, I'm a man of my word. If we lose a total of 3 times, this challenge is over, and I have to destroy every single card we've opened in this entire run, and now must go through the punishment of destroying every single card we pull, including all of the rare, valuable cards. And just to show you that I'm serious, I even made sure to really destroy these cards by blending them up into a very appealing cardboard paste. Jump into this video next for more Pokemon content. And if you'd like to see me try this challenge again, let me know in the comments and by liking this video, since I still have plenty of packs left to open. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.